it's quite clear that some of, and these are red states, the ones that voted
Indeed.
dramatically for Trump. So if Trump loses enough of his constituents, his voting strength, even he will have to think twice about some of the things he's doing.
So, no carve out, no exemptions for the UK when it comes to Trump's tariffs, though the British government still hopes it can negotiate some kind of new trade deal which would ameliorate levies on British exports to America. The problem is that Donald Trump doesn't see tariffs as merely a matter of trade or economic policy. They're a multi purpose weapon for whatever takes his fancy. So Canada and Mexico were tariffed not just for supposed trade imbalances, but because Trump claimed they weren't tough enough in stopping fentanyl flowing over the border into America. Then he threatened tariffs on any country that bought Venezuelan oil because he wants to undermine the Maduro dictatorship there. Now the Trump administration is indicating that it will link free trade with free speech. This morning's Telegraph quotes a US source saying there should be, quote, no free trade without free speech, which could be a particular problem for Britain. Vice President J.D. Vance is apparently monitoring a case involving an anti-abortion campaigner in Bournemouth. He's already implied that hard-right thug Tommy Robinson is some sort of political prisoner. He recently told the Munich Security Conference that free speech in Europe and the UK was under threat, and there are plenty more British cases to attract his attention. Kathleen Burke is a professor of modern and contemporary history at University College London. She specialises in US-UK relations. She joins me now. And Kathleen, let me come straight to this question. We've got two cases involving anti-abortion campaigners. Times Radio producer Maxie Allen was arrested after complaining about his child's school. Humus-eating pacifists were rounded up by police at a Quaker meeting house. So I guess if you're so inclined as J.D. Vance is, you can create an image of Britain as a kind of socialist police state.
Oh dear. It is difficult. It is difficult, except, of course, that this sort of thing happens in the States quite frequently. I mean, not everyone in this country backed the activities of the police going into the Quaker meeting house. But nevertheless, the Americans in office right now in the federal government tend to believe in one sort of free speech. I don't think it's going to have that much effect on trading relations. For one thing, the trading relations are being, in a sense, run by the Council for Trade and Industry to the president, Peter Navarro, and he has practically since he was born been a proponent of high tariffs. So whether or not, I do not think that if all of a sudden the UK conformed to what Vance is saying, that there's no free trade without free, I don't think that will override tariffs. That is to say, I think if the UK was as free as a bird in terms of speech and so forth, it would not move the Americans one bit.
The Americans, J.D. Vance and some others in the Trump administration, like to highlight examples of what they think are attacks on free speech in Britain. I mean, we could do the same. I've just come back from the States, which I visit on a regular basis. There are students and postgraduate students being lifted off the street by masked men in plain clothes and bundled into unmarked cars and taken to a penitentiary in Louisiana, 1,500 miles away. Several cases of that. That it seems to be largely for what they've written or said, a free speech issue. I kind of feel that it probably wouldn't be helpful if we were to point that out to the Trump administration.
But we can all think it, can't we? I mean, that's precisely
We
my
are.
point. And I'm sorry, they probably don't prioritize listening to British radio, no matter how much we all think it, how good we all think it is. That's a conundrum. That really
Mm.
is, because there's nothing we can say, look at you, that's not going to upset President Trump and so forth. We can't just sit back and allow it to be said. So I suspect that in Downing Street, they're spinning on their feet at this point and just hoping it will go away.
I think you're probably right. I mean, Keir Starmer is doing his best to keep the show on the road. But when you look at tariffs, Trump's hostility to Ukraine, his affection for President Putin, his hostility to Europe, it's quite hard to keep Anglo-American relations on an even keel, is it not?
Well, that's what Starmer's trying to do. And thus far, without being partisan about this, I think he's doing a very good job. He knows that belting out how appalling Trump is being will get him nowhere except scatological responses. He knows that working with, trying to make it clear just how useful the United Kingdom is to the United States, and that at least he's not yelling. And I'm sure diplomacy shouldn't be done by megaphones. That's just stupid. Doing it in rooms quietly with a lot of coffee around and the odd bad sandwich is, I'm sure, the way to do it. And that's what Starmer and the British are doing. I don't think they could do much better. I
No,
don't sound like
I agree with
I
that.
don't.
I mean, I think they're doing as well as they can in difficult circumstances. But the assumption behind what Keir Starmer is trying to do is that when it comes down to it, the Trump administration is on the major issues on our side. That we see the world and broadly the same way. But that might not be true anymore. Mr. Trump seems to want Russia to win in Ukraine. It's not just animosity towards Europe, it's downright hostility towards Europe. Article 5 of NATO, he questions. You can't guarantee America would live by that anymore. We may have hit a watershed where Britain and America are no longer on the same side.
Well, it depends on what you mean by side. I mean, it has been pointed out, and Trump probably thinks this. If his main concern is China, he does not want Russia and China to be together. I mean, the U.S. did the same thing in the 60s, didn't it? Tried to encourage and give attempts to separating Russia and China at that time, Soviet Union and China. So I don't think if you look at geopolitical strategy, it's such a stupid thing to do. If you look in terms of what geopolitics ought to be like, it's just appalling. It's just appalling. And I only hope that Europe and the UK can get themselves together and have more than what we've got now in terms of armaments and such like, that we can stand up to it. But the thing is, that's going to take 10 years. So the best thing you can do is try quietly to divert President Trump from being so appalling. And thank heavens for Vladimir Putin, because he's publicly, essentially, and certainly his media has said, Trump is just being stupid.
Well, even if the UK government was so minded, because I think this is a particular problem for Britain given our history and the Anglo-American relationship, even if the UK government was so minded, untangling Britain from America is no easy task. Our economic ties are immense, our military, security, and intelligence are entirely intertwined.
But we don't want to distwine, as it were, or re-untwine, or however you want to say it. That would be foolish for us. Foolish. For all the sorts of reasons you say. I mean, just think of intelligence. I mean, that's the one thing that has the main thing that is tied. The US and the UK are tied up with military alliances. That's the only real alliance. And intelligence has been Britain's greatest strength there. Because although the US has the money for signals, the UK tends to be rather better in human intelligence.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's not just the UK that would lose. And I think they realize that over there.
Well, I understand the reason we don't want to untangle. I take that. But administrations come and go. But of course, if J.D. Vance was to form the next one, then there wouldn't be that much of a difference. And it's quite hard to maintain the historic close relationship that we've had with the United States, if you're dealing with an American government that is treating Canada disgracefully, Canada, a faithful ally to Britain, a member of the Commonwealth, has outright hostility to Europe, is almost preparing the ground to annex Greenland, Denmark, of course, being an ally of the United Kingdom, a very close ally, and seemingly has no time for Ukraine, in which Britain is fully invested in defending and hoping it will see off the Russians. Pretty hard on all these fronts to keep up being good friends.
We don't want to be good friends. We want to have a stable relationship. And
Indeed.
I think that, well, two things. One, if Vance does succeed, he doesn't have Trump's charisma. So I think the unbreakable coalition right now would not stay. Secondly, we'll see what these tariffs do. If, judging from all the screaming and yelling at all these town halls that Republican office holders are holding, it's quite clear that some of, and these are our red states, the ones that voted dramatically for Trump. So if Trump loses enough of his constituents, his voting strength, even he will have to think twice about some of the things he's doing. I hope.
Final question for you, Professor. I mean, the Anglo-American relationship may no longer be so special, especially under Mr. Trump, but it is still hugely important to the UK. I think we can both agree on that. Does it survive a second Trump administration?
Well, I used to think that because the militaries work together, the Navy works together, the civil servants on both sides work together, the foreign offices both work together with the State Department, that leaders come and go, and that would continue to work together. But I take your point. 8 years might unstrengthen these ties. And I think if Vance is elected, we'll be in difficulties. And I hope we are prepared for it by then.
Indeed. Well, it would give us some time. But I hope you're right in being optimistic, and I hope I'm wrong in pointing up the fears. Nothing would please me more to see the relationship continue. Professor Kathleen Burke of University College London, thank you for joining me on Times Radio.